Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator.
And I'm Lindy Buckingham Shutt, a professor of human nutrition, guest co host, and a mom to one sweet angel baby and one young spirited eater.
Yes, I
Mhm.
love how you're mixing it up every week. Love it, especially since
Oh,
Ferocious debacle, that was
yes, yeah.
confusing.
But it could be ever changing too. Some
Yes. Yeah,
nights he is insatiable, some nights he is spirited. So
yes, we love it. So yes, every episode this season, we're here with Lindy chatting all about kids and food, and today in particular, right? Kind
mhm.
of gonna be getting into that. We're gonna be building off of last week. We were talking about feeding in the first 1,000 days. You might remember you heard all kinds of good stuff from pregnancy to the first year, from 1 to 2 years old. Lots of good strategies and recommendations for kind of helping establish that groundwork for having a healthy independent eater.
Yes, yeah. And this week, we are growing up
Ah,
in age and we're going to be talking about preschool and school agers. I hope everyone caught the food pun.
yeah, there it is. I know it.
Mhm.
When you said that earlier, I was like, growing. Well, I mean, what would you say for food? What do you do? You grow it. You grow food. That's what you do. Food and children, both.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. And I think of this when we were trying to decide, like, okay, growing good eaters. I was like, well, they're kids. I don't know. What is this age group? They're children. They're the
Yes.
kids, the school agers, I don't know, just kids.
Just everything going through all the changes that we're going to talk about today, which is
Oh,
miraculous and also very scary.
yeah. Right, there's just a lot. And so, yeah, we're gonna be sharing information from, kind of ages 2 all the way up through kind of age 8, and, again, a lot of it based on that healthy eating research report we've referenced a few times this season. All kinds of good nuggets in here, but yeah, we are gonna be looking across that age span, so you can listen. I mean, you can hopefully the whole episode. You can listen to the whole episode. But it's all right if you're maybe like tuned into one age a little more than the rest because maybe that one's living in your home right now.
Yes.
So we do think it's important. You've heard me talk about it before, this idea of a developmentalist perspective when it comes to parenting. Well, developmentalist perspective is appropriate when it comes to food, too. And essentially, that just means that age and development is, as the authors of the textbook that we love, the Handbook in Parenting, said, it is a highly relevant justification. AKA,
Mhm.
yes, we can pay attention to that age and that stage to understand how we can support our kids, how we can interact with them. So, just a quick reminder that we're going to keep that perspective of their age matters. And we're going to remember, as we talk about ages and stages today in this episode, they're averages. Your child may kind of be right on track with one of these, maybe a little ahead on one, a little behind in a certain domain. And that is all right. We know that that is influenced by things like temperament, potential developmental delays, environmental factors, all kinds of stuff. So we're talking in generalizations and averages. But if you do have concerns about that, we have a whole season on it. But also feel free to talk with your healthcare professional. They'll be ready and willing to answer those questions for you too.
Yes. 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 Perfectly said, and tease us up. Really great to talk about a series of doctors that put out this healthy
Mm.
eating research report that we keep talking about. So this we keep referencing it. This healthy eating research report. It was put together by an expert panel of pediatricians and health experts, and they continue to remind us throughout this report that different food parenting practices have different effects at different ages. So, one example they give is among children 7 and older, structured guidance and rulemaking is more effective in preventing unhealthy eating. So,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to talk a little bit about why as we talk about the different ages and stages. But when we think about our younger kiddos, our 6 and younger, rewarding with verbal praise is more effective in terms of promoting healthy eating and preventing unhealthy eating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that idea of certain strategies, I mean, like with temperament, certain strategies are more effective with certain kids. Certain strategies can be more effective at certain ages. That's like another consideration of what practices we use and what works. And I think that we're going to see why it starts to make more sense, that differentiation of, well, for 6 and younger, that modeling and that positive encouragement versus for older kids, why maybe structure. So, teaser, stay to the end.
Yes.
Yes. So that development is a really important part of the considerations that we're going to have, because we do want them to be healthy and independent eaters.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Absolutely. So we powered through. Those are technically our first two, as you many of you might know. We usually go through like 3 or 4 research citations. We powered through 2 already. Go us!
Mhm. Mhm.
But because we want to save lots of time to get into these kind of developmental domains of these different ages, so you might remember that a developmental domain is basically just a category for a kind of development. So we're going to start with our 2 to 3 year olds, right? We're going to be going all the way up through age 8, but starting with our 2 and 3 year olds, kind of our young preschool, older toddler, that we're going to start with. And so we will look at kind of what is happening in this stage of parenting and in this stage of development, right? Not just
Yeah.
related to food, but in general. What do we know
And
about kids that are 2 to 3 years old?
yeah, and then how that applies to their actual eating. So, um,
Yes.
and I do want to mention that a lot of resources and tools related to these specific age ranges are available. If you go to healthyeatingresearch.org, they have very specific recommendations based off of these ages. So go there if you're looking for more detail than you're going to get even today.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Great advice to go find more information. So, as we think about our 2 and 3 year olds, what are we talking about? Well, as parents during this time, we're usually doing lots of boundary setting. They're getting more mobile and wanting to make more of their own choices. And the no, I do it's. Or actually, this is really sweet. My son is in this stage. He's like right about 3. And he, instead of saying, no, I do it, which is what I've heard a lot of kind of toddler preschoolers say, I got this.
Mm.
It's so sweet,
Confident,
right?
confident young man.
"I got
Yes.
this, mom," and whether it's buckling a car seat or getting something himself from the fridge or pantry, "I got this." And so we're setting expectations around which things they can do, what are acceptable choices, what's acceptable behavior. We also know that with that comes, sometimes some feistiness, right? We're starting to
Mhm.
get more resistance for things that we used to just kind of like do for them, and things like that. So that's kind of what's happening in the midst of all of this development that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so first we're going to talk about how these feisty young youngsters, I sounded like an old man
Yeah,
there.
I'm like, you youngsters, there was
um,
kids these days.
kids these days, 2 to 3 year olds these days. Okay, so specifically when we think about their motor skills at this age, which of course motor skills play a very important part in our eating and feeding
Hmm.
ourselves. So between the ages of 2 and 3 years old, children can eat without assistance. You know, uh,
To an extent.
To an extent, yes. They can use a spoon to scoop food and a fork to stab food. So they can successfully, do that. But it's another thought if they can actually get it into their mouths or if it will go all over the floor. But yes, they are trying.
Yes. Similarly, to going all over the floor, kids at
Hmm.
this age can be starting to use, I mean, depending on when you've started as a parent, but getting more skillful, maybe we should say, with an open cup.
Mm,
So maybe transitioning out of like the sippy cup stage, or maybe you never were using one at all, but they're getting a little more skilled and coordinated at that. And I remember this very specifically. They can use straws more effectively. We went from like the baby bird dropper version of the straw, right? You like
mhm.
get some water in your straw and would drop it. The you can use my straw now. Glorious. We love that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think probably a lot of parents are aware, but you can get all different sorts of age appropriate utensils for 2 to 3 year olds,
Hmm.
younger than 2 to 3 year olds when they just start eating. So those might be really great for your kids. Your kid might use them. It might actually help them do a better job of eating, getting the food in their mouth, and even enjoying food. Um, but it might not help them at all. They might want to just use their hands. And at this age, it might still be appropriate to do so. So
Hmm.
be flexible and understanding at this age, and you might need to also try out different tools.
Oh, absolutely. And it's great to know the options, right? Like you might not need that. Like you might try your spirited eater might just go for it.
Oh yeah.
But it's also
Hmm.
possible, like, okay, if we're needing some support, there might be tools out there that could help us with that.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
And then lastly, in this motor, I just want to mention that children at this age are probably going to be able to chew a little bit better. They're going to have their molars for better or for
Mhm.
worse. So they might, so at this point, you can try introducing different textured foods like raw vegetables and meat.
Mhm.
So this might be a relief for some parents. I know for me, having to always roast or
Mm.
steam or anything my child's vegetables, it'll be
Mhm.
nice when I can just offer them the raw vegetable.
Like, oh, no prep required. Give it a
No prep
little rinse.
required. Yes. Yes, and not be so scared of watching them eat. So,
Oh, yes. So we know that their physical development, right? What they're able to do with their body impacts how they physically eat and what they eat. But what about cognitive, right? We're kind of moving into this area. So their brain, the types of things they understand and how that relates to food. In particular, kids at this age, they're starting to understand the concept of counting. And yeah, it probably won't be in the full sense of, I understand this is one and this is nine. But they can understand the simplistic concept of like, I want 2 of that, right? I would like 2 grapes. I would like 2 carrots. I want another one, right? And so that idea of 1 versus 2 and that 2 is more. So yeah, might not be full on counting at this age, but getting kind of the sense of I could ask for another one.
yes. Yes. Yeah. So it's also at this age that this might be important that the children also can start to bargain with us, which is wonderful, right? I mean, we
Yes.
want
It's
them
an
to
advanced
be
cognitive skill.
it is it's adorable, I think, to a degree, right? I'm saying that as someone who does not have this age of child right now.
Uh,
But this is also, an opportunity to think again about that division of responsibility.
mhm,
We are the ones who provide the food. We're the ones who decide when, where, and what, and they get to decide whether or not they eat it. So if they're bargaining with you to, bring them their favorite food at the table, that's when you say, well, this is what I like again,
mhm.
have some fixed options, offer
Yes.
2 to 3 options, but watch out for that bargaining and how you're responding to it so you're not leaning too far into that indulgent
Absolutely.
eating
And yeah, it
style.
it is sweet when we're like, "Yeah, you're getting a new cognitive skill," but also like a, "And here we go. And here we are," right?
Buckle up, yeah.
Yes. And then another important domain to think about in our kids' development, particularly in this at this age when so much is happening, is language. What they understand and what they communicate, right? Because we do provide the food, right? The division of responsibility, their language and their ability to communicate is really important when it comes to eating and feeding. And so, one thing that's cool about their language at this age is they're starting to understand two-part directions, which means that prior to this age, they probably weren't. Right. And so that can be like, oh, do I have an expectation gap? Am I expecting
Mhm.
too much? So, around ages 2 to 3, that they can start to have directions like, go get in your chair and eat your lunch. Right. That's a two-part direction. And so they're getting better at being able to understand and implement those types of things.
Yes, yes, and in addition to that, there's the language, they also are hearing your language, so they can discern, the effect and meaning based on the speaker's tone of voice. So,
Mhm.
watch what you're saying. If you're saying in a more stern or demanding voice, "Eat that cracker," versus inviting,
Yes.
"Eat your cracker." That's something to be again, when we think about how, control and those kind of things are affecting the way they're eating. More controlling, eat your crackers versus a more inviting, eat your crackers would be positive
Yeah.
reinforcement.
Yeah, they're picking up on that tone now.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
picking up on it. The other thing that I think is really interesting about the language at this age that they talked about was that they can start to have more, like, more phrases and sentences and more conversational turns, which essentially is like back and forth, right? I say this, they said that, I say this, which goes with that bargaining. But also that they can explain a little bit more. Whereas when they were maybe like infants or kind of young toddlers, they might just say like cookie or wawa or whatever food it was that was a favorite that they wanted. They might just say one word. And now they can use phrases like, I want that, right? Like, I want water, or can I have a drink as they get older? And so, thinking about how they're even communicating about that improves, of course, with age.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that it's also worth saying at this point, as these language skills develop, if you haven't already, this is a great time to start implementing those family meals
Mm,
because we are seeing all this language development, and there is an opportunity to help not only model the appropriate food to eat, but also have that really wonderful time to have that social aspect, that conversation too, and build their language skills.
Absolutely. And oh my gosh, what a beautiful segue, because the last domain we're going to look at is social emotional.
Did
And a
not do that
big
on purpose.
I know, you built it right
Oh,
in
mhm.
accidentally. But yeah, as we think about social emotional is really about how our kids relate to us, right? The people around them, and that emotional component of like understanding themselves and regulating themselves. And so a big part of what's happening in this kind of 2 to 3 year old age range is that they're getting very interested in what other people do. They're starting to understand they're their own person, which means the modeling that we offer, right? Where like eating family meals, right? What types of foods we eat, and that we are kind of like do what we say and do what we hopefully are also doing,
Yes.
because that modeling is an important part. They're really paying attention to that.
Yes, and in addition to that, for the most part, kids this age like routines. They still like routines,
Mm-hmm.
and they might get upset when their routines are disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good at this age again to continue to have those boundaries. Continue. I mean, it's going to be important to continue to have that structure, but this is a time where it is good to continue to have and set those boundaries.
And I often say around routines, we tend to be a family that like I like to protect our routine. I want to kind of stay home. I enjoy like novelty and excitement. But yeah, in terms of like taking my kids on a big trip, no, they value their more routine more than they value, right? They're like as excited about like the park down the street at this age as they would be about some big elaborate park, for the most
Yes.
part. And so yeah, that protection of routine is age appropriate.
Mhm.
Um, and then another one that's kind of related to that concept of self, they're starting to understand at this age that they could maybe think or believe something different than you do. So it might be like, well, you might think that soup is delicious, but I do not. Or, yeah, mom loves this tortellini, but I do not. um,
Yes.
I even, I hear it. We talk about this phrase all the time in our house, part of it being sibling disagreement at the ages they're at. But my child, who's right about 3, is can now use the phrase "I disagree." So when they
Mm.
disagree about something, so like sometimes it is used at the dinner table of like I'm like, oh, this is delicious, or I think the flavors are good, or like I love this. I disagree. I'm like, well, that's tactful of you at least.
That is tactful. Yes. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong here because I
Mhm.
think you're more of the expert on developmental, but maybe, the ability to be able to express their difference is going to encourage them, or maybe they are going to be more apt to then, whether or not they disagree, maybe offer that area of disagreement just to disagree.
Yep. Yep. They're totally is totally normal of like, yeah, I have my own thought. It's like when my toddler would tell me no. Do you want this? No. And then like would accept it, right? Because they're just that like, I have an opinion. I
Hmm.
can influence, and we talk about like secondary and tertiary reactions, whatever. But I can influence other things. So, like I say no, and then you don't give it to me. How crazy. And like so they're experimenting with that. And so yeah, sometimes it's like the I disagree. Like I don't think this is delicious. Again, that doesn't mean I will never like this for the rest of my life. Repeated
Hmm.
exposure. And it might not even mean they really don't like it at this age. Maybe they don't like it
Yes.
today. But yeah, there's always room for not negotiation. There's always room to re-expose.
Re-expose, yeah. No, and I appreciate that because this is the age in when you read, well, I was about to say in the literature, but in real
Yeah.
life, because let's be real, this is, I mean,
Yes.
real life, but this is the age where you do tend to see a lot of picky eaters or the
Mhm.
emergence of picky eating. So again, repeated exposures and understand that it is just a part of the development that your kid might becoming picky. And I'm saying this and reassuring myself this as I am will be approaching this age. So
Yes,
I
they
mean,
do.
not
It
me approaching this age, my son
yeah.
approaching this age.
Yeah. You are well past. You did so good, Lindy. You made it. But
Oh,
yeah, that is a part of them expressing themselves, understanding their own opinion. Like, it's developmentally appropriate for them to get a little more selective instead of
mhm,
just, "Yeah, whatever you." I'm like, "No, I have an opinion. I can express it." So
mhm.
very appropriate for a 2 to 3-year-old.
Yes.
So, thinking about everything we just said, right? We covered 4 domains. But thinking about 2 to 3-year-olds and your knowledge on this and food, what kind of reflections or advice would you say about this age?
Oh, um, well, I mean, is it going to be fair to say be flexible but set boundaries?
Yeah, both.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. But pulling back from our conversation about different feeding styles. The authoritative type of feeding style,
Mm,
being responsive. So being able to set that structure, but then also let them explore and still understand. Just completely
mm,
division of responsibility coming back
mhm.
again.
Absolutely. And, I think of narrowing that down. We talk about this with all toddlers and young preschoolers, but uh, especially when it comes to food, offering choices that we're okay with, right? Like, if I'm going to offer, would you like this or that, right? This cup or that cup is like the classic example we give of a choice. But like, yes, would you like a little or a lot? Would you like one or two? Would you like this? I mean, we will even do like warmed up. Would you like this warmed up?
Mm.
And so thinking about where they can exert that opinion and exert that independence while still being empowered, while still having, right, they can have autonomy and structure. That's where they
Mhm.
both are. And so yeah, offering that choice to, yes, you have an opinion, it's allowed. We don't have to fight every opinion, right?
Yeah, I love that, and
um
I'm sure the child will love that too,
yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed, right, they're responding to
Yeah,
those choices.
yeah.
All right. And then that's going to move us into this kind of 4 and 5 year old stage. So we're moving on up. And
Mhm.
what do we know about this stage of kids and our stage of parenting? With our 4 and 5 year old, kind of our older preschooler, kindergarten ish age, they're starting to have more experiences out of the home, right? Whether they're going to preschool or kindergarten, right? They might be going to school, childcare. And because they're spending more time outside and they're kind of just getting started. So there's some curiosity. They might be in different situations. Maybe they're starting one, maybe a little extracurricular activity, or maybe they're doing after school care instead of like a full-time child care. And so there's just some shifts in what's happening in the world around them. And yeah, even the shift from preschool to kindergarten. And so because that's happening around them, we just see them getting a little more curious. And we're going to see that in these different stages too.
Yes, yes. So again, we're going to go through the different kind of dimensions of development here. So
Mhm.
starting with motor, this is very exciting. I think this is very exciting. But between ages 4 and 5, this is when children can spread and cut with a knife. So they're starting to
Yeah.
develop more of those motor skills.
Mhm.
And then they can also drink from an open mouth cup without assistance. And this it says per the report without spilling. I'm not sure how realistic that is,
Pretty
but
effectively, how about?
yes, yes,
Pretty
pretty
effectively.
effectively.
They're pretty
Yes.
good.
Unless they're distracted by something else going
The
around
dog.
them.
It's always the
Mhm.
dog.
It's always yeah, I was gonna say dog. I was just like, I've said dog so many times.
Maybe it is a different pet or an
That's
animal out
true.
the window.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, those motor skills are still coming into play. They can do more things because of them. Then thinking about cognitive, by 4 years of age, the way that they're thinking and understanding, they're starting to understand the difference between like something is the same or different. So you might hear phrases like, that's different than the one we use at school. Right. Or like, I like the peanut butter with the red lid. Right.
Mhm.
They're starting to notice those things, and having a stronger understanding of those differences, which might mean being more selective about them.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, having the food environment that you want from an early stage is gonna be
Hmm.
really helpful when it comes to this, right? So that they're familiar with those things. So if
Hmm.
they don't want different, you have the same.
Yes, yes. Yes, and they're beginning to understand a little bit more about time structure here too, which I think is like, okay, we're going to hear this too in case we have younger kids, which means they maybe didn't have such a solid understanding of time before this age. So when we said you can have this in an hour or you can have it tomorrow, well, now they get that a little more, which also, I will say from experience, comes with some accountability.
Mhm.
How often my child of this age says, "You said, like you said, mom," and I'm like, you are correct. I said that. I
You are
did
so
say that.
smart.
Yeah. They're like, oh, you remembered. Busted. Oh, yeah. So they're learning a lot of things that time. And yeah, that can relate, like that can come into play with food. And then another cognitive one being they're getting more aware of the rules and expectations, right? At 2 to 3, they're still kind of learning what they are. By 4 to 5, they're a little more established. But because they're feeling, I mean, because they're feeling pretty smart,
Mhm.
they are starting to test boundaries and might do more arguing with you about, what's offered or And yes, I can attest to this one too. Right, my daughter does not want me to serve the tortellini, and so
Mhm.
there's a little more argument. And so, but still being prepared, we can still use those structure practices. We can still use the division of responsibility, but knowing it's not your child being ungrateful, not being difficult. It's a developmentally appropriate thing for them to kind of argue with you a little bit about the food at this age.
Yes, this age, and likely maybe we'll talk about this again when they're teenagers. I don't know.
Yeah, it's coming back around.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So moving into language. By age 4, children know names or groups or for groups or categories. So
Mhm.
they know apples and oranges are both fruit. They can
Mhm.
also express themselves using words like because or if. So
Mm,
I don't want to eat that food because it has spots on it. And lastly, I feel like this a lot. They're asked more questions like why. Why
mm.
do I need to eat this? Um, those types of things. And I think all of this to me is just an opportunity to educate them on the whys and that this has spots on
Yes.
it because that's the way it was grown, and then maybe showing them that it was, where it was grown or how it was grown, those kind of things. So it's a rich an opportunity for exploring food in a new way.
Yes, because they can understand and express all of that now. Yeah, prime
Mhm.
opportunity. And I also think that language comes in when the way they can express themselves, in like a more sophisticated way, right? They're having kind of lengthier conversations. I mean, kind of going back to the arguing they can do because cognitively, language wise, right? They
Mhm.
can start to negotiate a little bit more. They can also start to say, like, they understand the abstract concept of like, this one I hear a lot in my house, like the passive approach to food, like of expressing it, like, that smells good instead of, "Can I have one?" Right? It's not a manipulation in terms of, like, they're exploring, right? They're exploring that interpersonal communication, and yeah, I hear them like, "Mm, well, I noticed this was in the fridge, mom." Not, "Can I have that?" But like, "Oh, I noticed." Right? And so that some of that subtlety, they're starting to get better at,
Mhm. It's very
as well
impressive.
as the negotiations.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, all right. And then our last domain here, thinking about our 4 and 5 year olds, is related to this social emotional, right?
Yes, yeah, so thinking about some of the social things that happen about age 4, children may begin to, feel more generous and share food with friends, and they might also become, because of this, more increasingly influenced by their peers' behavior. So just thinking about, what choices they have, what choices their friends have, and how they're modeling those for each other.
Absolutely. And another thing that's interesting about their development here, it's kind of a mix of cognitive and emotional, but that they still don't really at this age can't really tell the difference between real and make believe, which a lot of times we talk about in reference to like screen time and fantasy, whatever. But in terms of food, this can mean that they're particularly vulnerable to food advertising, right? Let's say there's like a favorite character in our house, it's the string cheese. Which string cheese package? It's the fight for what the character won, right? But because they don't necessarily, it's part of that. They don't have that full understanding. But I have seen this really nifty hack. I wish I could tell you where it came from. I don't know. But that like bringing character stickers to the store and like putting them on the foods you're already planning to buy. Like, look,
I love
this
that.
has your favorite character on the banana. This is their favorite banana.
I love that idea, using food marketing in a positive way. Oh, yes.
Right? Right, like,
Mhm.
"Oh, look at this exciting choice." But I thought that was a nifty hack because I absolutely see that. We have, like, a can of soup that has a favorite character that a grandparent lovingly purchased for one of my kids because they were like, "Oh, they wanted this at the store so bad." I'm like, "They don't know what that is." They saw it had their favorite character on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think bringing this full circle is just another reminder to parents out there that there's so many things that influence what our kiddos eat.
Yes.
So, you
Mm,
know, you take that and use it with, okay, well, this is why they keep asking for this food at this age. It's because there's that character on
yep. Yep, and whether that's to our help or to our detriment, right? That exists.
it. Yes. Yes.
Another kind of important thing that's happening in this age group is the idea of truth versus lie. They're getting a little bit better, maybe not at outright deceit, but maybe kind of like hiding the truth, right? Like, yeah, sure. I did that. I ate that. and it's like in their pocket. Or sometimes, I mean, I feel like I more often hear the reverse of like, I didn't eat that. I don't know where that was. I think I told you guys the story, everybody, on the listeners, you guys, everybody out there, about the raw sugar. One morning, my children were eating raw sugar for breakfast. It's a risk
Mhm.
I take by letting them be in charge of their breakfast. Not my best moment, but
Oh.
yeah, nobody did that. Weirdly, everybody in our house said, "Nope, wasn't me. I didn't do it." But they are getting better at that at this age of kind of like, I know something you don't, so I could deceive you a little.
Yeah. Well, and they also don't want to make you mad, which is
Yes, sweet.
maybe sweet.
So thinking about this age, these 4 and 5-year-olds, what kind of reflections and advice would you give, Lindy?
Well, I mean, I think all of these different dimensions, all these different developmental milestones point me to that this is such a rich stage or rich opportunity to engage them in learning about food,
Mm,
learning how to cook, learning how to prepare, learning how to grow, and talking to them about why food is the way it is or what's good about food, what's not good
yes,
about food. Yeah, they're just they want to please you and they also want to learn.
absolutely. And yeah, mine kind of builds off of that. And because they're learning so much, they're starting alongside getting more kind of independence, not outright in charge of everything that they do, right? Or doing it totally without you, but they can take in some of that knowledge and turn it into some action. Right? Like I can make a choice because I understand carrots are good for my eyes, right? I learned
Mhm.
that. I also think Iowa State Extension has, and a lot of different states have, a pick a better snack program that sometimes will come into a school district. They learn about a specific food, they get to try it, learn about how it grows, and things like that. And I think that's a great example. This is a prime age for that. They can take in some of that information. And then the other thing I think is really powerful at this age is that modeling, right? Spending that time
Mhm.
together. They're soaking up what we're doing. And we're going to learn in the next stage that they're starting to soak up more from other people.
Mhm.
So at this stage, I think modeling is really powerful. Uh,
Yes.
so in that next stage, I mean, speaking of, definitely built my own segue there.
Beautiful
Uh,
transition.
yeah, thank you. For our 5 to 8-year-olds, so a little bit older, definitely kind of that school age. Thinking about what we know about this age in season 5, you might remember us saying something along the lines of this is the most active stage of life. Kids at this age are busy. They are getting involved in activities. They're having school. They're spending more time with their friends, right? Like my daughter is starting to like play with the kids across the street. And they're really starting to seem more like big kids,
Mm.
getting bigger,
Yes.
much more. They make choices that we're not always a part of. Um, the world and around us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, going toward to what the different skills are, dimensions, motor. It's these kids are starting to use fork and knife together to cut food and are able to
Mhm.
use cutlery without being too messy, that we hope. So
Yes.
again, more being able to be even more independent eaters and eat a different variety of food.
Mhm. They're making their own PB&Js now.
Oh my goodness.
They're on it.
Yes.
Well, and then thinking about cognitively what they understand, what they're doing that can impact food. We said at 4 and 5, they were kind of naming categories and understanding that categories and food groups might exist. Well, now that they might be able to do that categorizing, right? Like this food is a vegetable, this food is a fruit, this food has lots of protein, right? So they
Mhm.
can use those categories to make decisions. But also, I think this is cool. They can start to kind of imagine a hypothetical. Like, what would happen if, and then they can get to the consequence of it, right? So as we think about choices they make, what would happen if I left the oven on, right? Or if I left this on the stove too long? What would happen if I eat this without asking? What
Yes.
would
Yeah.
happen if I eat this entire container of parade candy? Right? They can start to think a little bit more about the consequence of a potential situation, which they couldn't really do before. So I think
Mhm.
that's really powerful.
It is, yeah, and again, another opportunity to talk to your kids about, well, what are the consequences if I, eat too much of this thing that might make maybe the
Yeah.
consequence is my stomach will hurt after it,
Mhm.
or yeah, or I'll
I
make my
will
mom
even think
sad.
if what if I never eat? Like, what would happen if I never ate a vegetable? What would,
Yeah.
right? Like my body couldn't grow as strong. I'd be missing vitamins, right? They can think through some of that a little more. Yeah. Or
Yes.
my mom and my parents might be sad.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
So then moving to language, between ages of 5 and 8, our children develop the ability to read and therefore the
Mm-hmm.
ability to take in more information about food. So this can be, also again, a really positive thing, an opportunity for them to read more about the way things grow, the way food gets to you, all of that thing. It also could lead to challenges. Say you go out to eat and now they can fully read everything that's on the menu, where before you went out to eat, you said, well, here are your options. So
And
again,
I'm
just
not going to give you the first three because I don't want you to have them.
yes, exactly. So this is would be, as a parent, that again, that opportunity to provide that structure, those boundaries, and say,
Hmm.
okay, well, here you can read this. These are your
Hmm.
options, but maybe our family we're going to pick through these two options or something like that.
Yeah, these are the choices that you have. And I also
Mhm.
think about, my daughter's in this age of kind of learning to read, the opportunity to take in some nonfiction and yeah, like
Mm.
food topics. I think we have a book about the garden and what can grow there. And so as they take in that information, it can be even enjoyable reading, or that's can be a way they're practicing their reading skills is through taking in some positive food information.
Yes. Hmm.
Mhm. And then our last domain here of social emotional. One of the things that we know is that their peers, their friends are getting more and more important. Hence the playing with the neighbor kids, right? But even as we think about eating school lunch with the kids next to them. And so we know that their peers or their friends are starting to have more influence. And that can be a positive thing in some ways, right? They see a friend trying new foods, or they have lots of vegetables for lunch, or they always eat that first. Right? There can be positive things and some kind of drawbacks, but our friends are starting to become very important and have influence on our eating behavior.
Yes. Yes. And maybe your child will be that child that's providing the positive modeling to the other children.
We love that too.
um, so children this age also tend to test boundaries,
Mhm.
but they are also generally still eager to please and begin to experience embarrassment. So say your child sneaks a cookie, they might be embarrassed if you find out. Again, kind of pushing those boundaries and feeling the consequences of them.
Mhm. Well, and something else we know about this age is, we've talked about it. I can't remember which episode now, but that at this age they can lie. They're more apt to lie to get out of trouble because they do want to please you, which means they will choose to lie so that you're not mad at them, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that can happen around food too, and like food sneakiness, and things like that. And so keeping that in mind. Um,
Yes. Yeah. I think you keyed it in there. This is why we don't restrict food, right? We don't want
mhm.
kids to feel like they have to sneak it around us or have to be embarrassed about eating something specific.
Absolutely, because they are at this age can feel embarrassed. If we are practicing like restriction or shaming around food, this can like a really powerful impact because they can experience embarrassment for sure now.
Yeah.
Um, but another thing, kind of on a lighter note, that kids are kind of at this age starting to be able to maybe disguise an emotion a little more. But might be like, okay, why does that matter for food? One of the examples in the report was like they might pretend to like the dinner that is offered at a friend's house, and I'm like, that's great news for me trying to teach my child to be tactful. That you can now
Oh,
pretend like, oh, thank you.
yeah.
This is delicious. I'm like, okay, they're the lying white lie. We don't have to go there,
Yes.
but yeah, that they can now distinguish some of their emotions, which is cool,
That is, yeah. That's really fascinating and
right?
also again scary to a degree.
Yeah, every stage, right? Lindy's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, what are they teaching me?
I love it.
But so in thinking about this kind of school age or middle childhood age and food, what kind of reflections and advice do you have for us, Lindy?
Um, I going back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this episode, this is around the age where we start to see it be even more important to really kind of set some more rules and keep a little bit more control of things. Not controlling to the degree where you're
Mm-hmm.
restricting, but also where you're providing that really positive structure. Because again, they're going to be maybe more influenced by their peers at school or going out and being able to identify different foods and things like that. So if when you bring them back home, having that positive structure, that positive food environment is going to be a really beneficial thing for kids this age.
Absolutely. And I really wanted to use the term like home base with that you're describing.
Mm.
You're like, yeah, that at home, this is how it works. And I'm like, yeah, home base. There's security, there's structure, there's flexibility. Yeah. Love that. And the one that came to mind for me actually tapping into kind of parenting content. We talk a lot about middle childhood as a time for parents when we're in an interpretive stage with our kids because they're experiencing more of the world without us. When they essentially come home, when they come back to us, um, they have questions, they have things they noticed, they have things they picked up on. And so I think as that relates to food, right? They notice that so and so might eat this a lot, and it could be things like one of my friends in my class brings food that we don't eat at home. And it's like, yes,
Mhm.
this person might be of a different culture and different kinds of food. It could be the nutrition information they heard the PE teacher talking about. It could be, right? There's all this information. And I think that's one of the things at this age, because their peers are important, because they're in other environments, they're getting information from a lot of different places now. And so I think we get to have a really cool role of helping them interpret whether that's nutrition information, eating habits, healthful body movement. We get to help them interpret that, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, and maybe learn from them.
Yeah, yeah, they might be teaching us stuff they learn at school, that's for sure.
Mhm. Yes.
Awesome. So, having moved through these kinds of stages of growing good eaters from the ages of kind of 2 to 8, all kinds of good stuff here from that healthy eating research report. But now it is time for us to get quizzed. From Mackenzie DeYoung, our podcast producer, going to come in and ask us that question. Oh, yeah, she looks giddy to ask. I'm nervous. What do you got for us?
Oh, goodness. So, as I was listening, there was a little bit that I was like, "Oh, man, I think maybe they answered my question."
Oh,
But I'm going to flip the switch. So, you talk a lot about incorporating foods into different things.
mhm,
I'm going to flip the switch and we're going to talk about like learning opportunities and learning activities, um,
mhm.
and areas where we can incorporate different types of learning or categories, I would say,
Yeah.
into food, the kitchen. I know one of these categories, I have 5 categories listed. There's probably
Oh,
more. Um, but I think Mackenzie's gonna have a few answers up her sleeves
okay,
for
I'm ready. I know
areas.
where this is headed, I think.
Think about how can you incorporate these, and I'll start with the easy one for you, but then we can move on from there. How can you incorporate these areas into food to either make it maybe more fun or just bring learning, different different topics, kind of, I guess I don't know the right way to say it, but like, learning multiple things at the same
Yes.
time,
Yes.
simplified version. So the first category, um, especially if Mackenzie's interest is literacy. How can we incorporate literacy
Mm.
into food?
Oh,
What
well,
is
I
Wow.
just I would love to talk about this because I just finished taking an extension
Yes.
outreach course, called
Yes.
Small Talk or Lean to
Yeah.
Start, and
Mhm.
they did a great job of talking about how we can use any type of mealtime, kitchen, food activities as a way to just one, to talk
Mm.
with your child, but
Mhm.
Mhm.
then, we talked a lot about how we can use it for math talk, and I think we referenced this as we talked about, well, now, at that, developmental stage, they can count to 2 or they can count 2. So
Yes.
that 1, 2, here's, 2 slices of bread or something like that. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna give my child 2 slices of bread, but,
Baby, voracious.
yeah. So, yeah, so that is my experience thus far, but
Mhm.
I'm sure Mackenzie has thoughts on that as well.
I am fortunate that I get to help lead a program specifically related to how we can implement kind of literacy, reading, language into our day. And yeah, of course, in the kitchen. And yeah, so reading books around food, around meals is a great opportunity. Reading recipes together. And when our kids are little and they don't read yet, even things like finding picture recipes of like,
Mhm.
okay, first we add water, then we add, right? So doing those types of activities, things that they can kind of lead the way on. There's all kinds of fun stuff. Even you can kind of flip it the other way, and some of the reading activities you do could be related to food.
Mhm.
Right. Or even sorting or labeling,
Mhm.
describing. That's another really great one. It's like, ooh, I'm noticing this orange. is kind of bumpy, it's kind of squishy,
Oh,
it has
yeah.
a strong smell, right? And so even just noticing those things, all great for their language and literacy development.
All right, so the next category Lindy already alluded to is
I knew
math.
it.
Math.
Yes.
Yes, sorry. I jumped the gun on the math. I just got
Good.
so excited. But yeah, I
Mhm.
think yes, math. You can uh do all those things when you're talking about even preparing food, like
Mhm.
I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to cut, I'm going to chop this one spear of asparagus. I'm doing a really bad job describing using these descriptions, but yeah, that or
Oh.
even, math talk is even more than that. Like I'm going to put these noodles into the pot, like they are going to go
Mhm.
into the pot. So um
Yes.
anything, just describing what you're doing when you're in the kitchen, in terms
Mhm.
of the placement and that kind of thing as well.
One thing I
Absolutely.
one thing I did hear from what you said is you were going to chop 1, and then what we
Mhm.
could talk about fractions, right? So then you add
Right, or division.
yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, depending on what type of math, right? Because an 8-year-old math is very different than a
Right.
3-year-old math. But
Yes.
even, like, we need to add more or less. We need to add a big cup or a little cup. That's kind of
Mhm.
terminology that'd be appropriate for younger kids. Well, yeah, or a half a cup for kind of our kids that have more of an understanding
Mhm.
of fractions. And even shapes. Shapes are an important part of this is a cylinder, and looking at the types of things that are in your kitchen. What shapes do we see? And so thinking about all of those different things, there's lots of different math concepts that are in there. Yeah, counting is a good one. And yeah, subtracting, adding. And I also think food is like the classic example, right? I think of like pie for fractions, but
Mhm.
pizza for fractions.
Yeah.
There's all kinds
Yeah.
of good stuff there.
Yes.
Um, Science.
Mm. Science. Well, I think Mackenzie already mentioned some of these, but talking about things that are hot or things that are cold, or this is
Mhm.
boiling, or what happens if you put oil and vinegar together, and
Ooh, that's a
that's a
good one.
type of that's a reaction because one thing's hydrophobic. I mean, I don't know if you need to get into that much detail,
I
but
love it.
there's so many opportunities, just the way food mixes, and
Mhm.
yeah. Mhm.
Mhm.
And then I think
Yeah.
science too. Sorry,
No, go
gardening.
ahead.
I think to take them out to
Mm.
the garden and talk about the science of why things grow.
Oh, absolutely. And
Mhm.
nutrition. Nutrition is
Oh
science.
yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, duh.
I'll say, I just want to make sure you didn't miss it.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Things he teaches about how
Oh
our body
man.
works when it comes to food, right? That's science. And yeah, the skills of like measuring and scooping and all of that stuff, like that's science. And so yeah, sometimes I think with our older kids, it can work great to do those kind of experiments and things like that. But sometimes a science skill is as simple as measuring. It is as simple as scooping, and that those are also skills. And yeah, all nutrition talk.
Mhm. All nutrition talk. Yes. Yep.
All right, I said I had 5, but I'm gonna just stick to 4 for time's sake. The
Yeah.
last one is nature.
Mhm.
Nature. Oh yeah. Oh,
Okay, you've
again.
been really good at jumping to the next
I
category she's
know.
about to say, Lindy. You are
Uh,
anticipating a whole
My
bunch.
mind.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, again, going back to, I think, nature, gardening, taking your kids to the farmers market, having them explore those kind of things is not only beneficial to having them learn about nature, but it's really beneficial to being like, oh, well, that's where that comes from, you know,
Mm,
that then maybe I'm more likely to eat it, or,
Yeah.
I saw that it was grown here, I went and helped pick it, like,
mhm.
and I'm going to eat it because I was a part of that process.
Oh, yeah. Well, and even I think the understanding, I mean, in addition, we talk a lot about produce, but, agriculture and, meat and all of those things, like
Mhm.
Iowa has lots of them. And so
Yes.
there's lots of opportunities too to understand like local foods, or, yeah, when you go to the farmer's market, meeting the people, like
Mhm.
this person grew this food. And so there's a lot of opportunities, of course, to gardening's a great opportunity to engage with nature. But yeah, like understanding food systems and who is a farmer and what they do. And
Mhm.
yeah, there's just great opportunities to food and nature. I mean, obviously, they grow and go hand in hand.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I'll let you off with that, but I just thought it'd be cool to kind of flip the switch and see how can we make it
Yes.
maybe more interesting too if people were like, "Okay, but how do I incorporate food into things?"
Oh,
So,
yeah.
what do we
Awesome.
think?
Thanks for that,
Mhm.
Ken.
Yeah, thank you. Great
Yeah.
question.
I'll say that's a fun one.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and very appropriate because in this age, our kids are starting to have like subjects, like they have social studies. They have like a nature or STEM or right. They
Mhm.
have reading. So very appropriate type of question for this age.
Yes.
So it's been fun to dig into these kind of domains and realizing, we talk so much about development in other seasons, but the skills our kids have, the things that they understand, the things that they can do also impact how they eat and what strategies, that are make the most sense to implement with them. So
Mhm.
it's all good news here in Growing Good Eaters. Lots of great strategies and information. And more coming next week, right, Lindy?
Yes, yes. Next week we're going to look again, we're growing. We're looking at teens and food.
Yeah, still talking about the food. Don't worry. Season 10, all about food.
Mhm.
But yes, thinking about our teens and what that's going to mean. So, thanks for joining us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. Don't forget that you can watch our video each week on our social media. You can find us at Science of Parent or go to scienceofparenting.org.
So come along with us as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality all along the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.